My parents are farm workers, and they used to work 6 or 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours per day. I grew up in a neighborhood where it was very common to see teenage pregnancy, gangster activity, and eventually I became a teenage mother at the age of 15. I dropped out of high school.
What you said right now about being grateful, and there was that viral picture, and it basically came out of being grateful to your parents.
Never did it cross my mind that it will go viral or that a lot of people were going to feel identified with the picture. Somehow when you're struggling, you think that you're the only one, but then you realize that there's a lot of people with the same story or similar story.
You turned to like the values of your mother and said, hey, I got to get an education.
I started remembering my mom. I started remembering her advice, and one of those advices was, if you want a better life, you need to get an education. If I want my life to change, I have to change.
You're an award-winning author with your book, Harvesting Dreams. And I mean, you get invited to be a keynote speaker like all over, internationally even.
You can use your adversities as an excuse to stop, or you can use it as a reason to keep moving forward.
And you come out ahead, and you're just so inspiring.
My only goal was to keep that promise that I made to my son.
Welcome to the VIVAMOS podcast. Today we have Erica Alfaro. She became known for this powerful photo, her college graduation picture, taken in the same fields where her parents worked as farm workers her whole life. She just wanted to honor them, and it ended up inspiring the world. You're going to hear her story, becoming a mom at 15, dropping out of high school, finding the strength to leave an unhealthy marriage, and rebuilding her life. Today, she's an international motivational speaker, an author, an entrepreneur helping other Latinos become authors, and a proud mother.
Well, welcome to Vivamos, Erica, and it's a pleasure and really an honor. You're an award-winning author with your book, Harvesting Dreams, and I mean, you get invited to be a keynote speaker like all over, internationally even. You're internationally recognized, and so it's just wonderful to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eric. It's really an honor to be here with you today.
Well, your story, your life story is very compelling. It's, I think in some respects it's tragic, but you've overcome these very difficult challenges in your life. What was like your biggest challenge growing up in your life?
I grew up in Mexico. In the area where I grew up, I never had any role models or no one to tell me that there was something bigger for me or that it was possible for me to go to college. But being able to dream big and visualize and meet other people it's truly the reason why I'm here and why I was able to accomplish what I have accomplished so far. Growing up in Mexico in a neighborhood where everyone grew up the same way as me, at that moment, I didn't think there was any challenges. I thought it was normal to have a house that when it rained, there was a river in the middle of the living room, or it had holes all over the walls. I thought that was normal. But I think my biggest challenge as a child was moving from one country to another and somehow realizing for the first time that we were on the side of economically struggling. And when I had that realization is when everything changed inside of me. It's when I started seeing my family and myself differently. And I think that was my biggest challenge.
Yeah. So coming here was a struggle. It was a challenge in learning English.
Yes, learning English, getting used to a new country, realizing that I was poor. And then at the same time, uh, my parents rented a small apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, and it was 11 or 12 of us in just one apartment. Growing up like that and not seeing your parents anymore, because my parents are farm workers, and they used to work 6 or 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours per day. And I grew up in a neighborhood where it was very common to see teenage pregnancy, gangster activity, and eventually I became a teenage mother at the age of 15. I dropped out of high school and I moved to live with my child's father.
And how was that?
At first, when you're a teenager and growing up with novelas and thinking that someone is going to come and rescue you, it's it's like it gives you hope. As a teenager, you just want that attention or want to be seen. But being with the person that at first made you so many promises and then became your biggest nightmare, it was horrible. It was an experience com- that till this day I see it as it completely changed my life. Being with the person that made you feel that you were so little that you couldn't achieve anything, someone that will constantly tell you you will never make it without me, or make fun of you because you didn't know how to speak English. It was difficult to be in a relationship like that.
Well, it's a
Yes.
betrayal. I mean,
Yes.
he tells you, "I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of the baby," and then betrays you by just changing everything on you.
Yes.
And at what point then, like, what was that point in time that you just said, after those 2 years, it's like enough was enough? Like, what took you to the next step?
Uh, I remember that I used to victimize myself and I used to think, oh, poor me, this is my life. Is this going to be me the rest of my life? But there was everything changed the night that my child's father forced me and my baby to sleep outside the house. It was in November and it was cold. In Fresno, it's extremely cold. But I remember that that day I realized that he was not only hurting me, that he could also hurt my son. And as a mother, my first instinct was to protect him. But also that night that I was outside the house, I started remembering my mom. I started remembering her advice, and one of those advices was, "If you want a better life, you need to get an education." And the way I understood it is, if I want my life to change, I have to change. And that is the moment that I said, "This is enough." I decided to go back to high school, just with the dream of completing my high school diploma.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was that night that basically your ex-husband made you homeless,
Yes.
that you turned to like the values of your mother and said, "Hey, I got to get an education."
Exactly, yes. After the situation of when my child's father forced me to sleep outside, we still stayed together for a year, but it was because I have nowhere to go. But in my head, there was this visualization that one day I was going to leave, that one day I was going to get my high school diploma. And uh, my child's father always tried to discourage me. He will tell me, "What makes you think that you can get a high school diploma if you don't even know how to speak English?" But once I obtained my high school diploma, I left the abusive relationship and I moved back to Oceanside with my parents. And that's when I enrolled in college.
Wonderful.
Hmm.
That's great. I mean, you made the decision, even though you
Yes.
stayed around another year, you had already made that decision to
I already
leave.
made that decision,
Yeah.
yes. And it's interesting because in my culture, it was not common. I never saw another woman in my family leave an abusive relationship. And I was always told like, "Oh, es el destino que te tocó. That is your destiny. Like there's nothing you can do about it. He's your child's father." And a lot of people will tell me it's difficult to be a single mom. You will never make it as a single mom. But even like that, I took the decision of like, maybe I will not make it, but at least I will try.
When you went
Yes.
home, you found the support.
For my mom, she tried her best to support me, but my parents working for the minimum wage, they rented a one-bedroom apartment. And my mom, I remember that when I arrived to the apartment, she told me, "Mija, I cannot help you economically. I don't have much to offer you. You will have to work hard to raise your child on your own." And she handed me a blanket and a pillow. And on the side of the sofa, she said, "You're going to sleep here." Yes. And I remember that night, not only was I scared, I was terrified because I was wondering, like, is this the right decision? Now I'm like sleeping next to the sofa. My baby at that time was 3 years old. And I was scared to the point that I was shivering. I was shivering all night, but in my family, we never talk about emotions. We never talk about the way we felt. And so it felt like if I was dealing with that on my own. Yes.
You were feeling doubt. Did I make the
Yes.
right decision? And,
Mhm.
and you're right. It's like I mean, I grew up with that where my
Okay.
parents were both,
Mm-hmm.
working really hard. My dad in a machine shop, my mom in a factory, and
Yes.
yeah, there wasn't a lot of talk about emotions. You kind of
Mm-hmm.
had to like satisfy kind of like your basic skills
Yeah.
almost, right?
Yes.
But you overcame. You were very strong at that
Mm-hmm.
point. How old were you at that point?
At that point, I was 18.
18.
Yes.
And still very strong emotionally. I mean,
Yes.
you'd gone through so much, and
Mm-hmm.
you're almost like barely an adult.
Yes. I think my son was the one that gave me that strength. I at this moment I still think about it. If I didn't have my son, I don't think I will have the strength that I had.
You're doing it
Yes.
for him.
Yes, I was doing it for him. Yes.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
wonderful. So then you were lucky enough to just get that courage to go to college, okay?
Yes.
And then you were living with your parents, or
Yes. As soon as I arrived to Oceanside with my parents, I enrolled in community college. I still remember the first day that I went to my first class. At that time, my Lucito was 3 years old, and we have never separated from each other. And since I was living in Fresno and my mom was in Oceanside, they didn't really. My son didn't know my mom that much. But I remember that day like if it was yesterday because I grabbed my Lucito. He was 3, and I told him, "Baby, mama's going back to school." Uh, my mama's starting college. One day I'll have a career. One day we will buy a house. We will have a puppy. You have to stay with grandma, be strong. And he looked very confused. And as soon as I handed my Luisito to my mom, he started crying. And then I just like ran out and we live upstairs. I went downstairs running and I was downstairs and I could hear him screaming. And I was there and in the stairs thinking like, who am I to think that I could like make it through college? And, like, what type of mother am I to leave my son like that? And I really wanted to go back and hug him.
so I cried all the way.
Yes, and I said I need to do this for him. He deserves a better life. And I took the public transportation, and while I was in the bus heading to college, I was crying the whole way. Um, and then I arrived on campus, and I felt like an imposter.
Was it easy for you, college, like the actual work?
Oh no, it was so difficult. I had to work full time, and at the same time, I was a full time student.
What makes you the happiest right now of all these struggles that you've been through?
Mhm.
Like right now, where you are in your life, author, speaker, what makes you happy right now?
There are many things that make me happy right now, and I think that one of the things that make me the happiest is to be able to be a role model to my son, who now started college, and also to be able to inspire my community. Today, I am very grateful for every adversity because now I understand my community and I get to inspire them and help them. And so everything that in the past for me was like, why me? Now is like, thank you. Thank you that I went through that because now I understand.
Hey,
Yes.
something you said that kind of resonated with me. I think we spoke about it. It's like something about testimony, right?
Hmm.
Can you
Yes.
can you
You
explain that?
cannot have a testimony if you were never tested.
Right. And that's so
Yes.
important, right?
Yes.
People think like if you struggle, it's like bad.
Hmm.
But I don't think so. And it looks for you as an example. It's
Yes.
you struggled a lot more than
Yes.
most people,
Hmm.
and you come out ahead, and you're just so inspiring. What you said right now about being grateful, okay?
Yes.
And there was that viral picture,
Hmm.
and it basically came out of being grateful to your parents, right?
Hmm.
Explain a bit about that day.
Yes. A week before my graduation ceremony, before obtaining my master's degree, I wanted to surprise my mom. And so I put my cap and gown, I walk into her room and I tell her, Mamita, we did it. And my mama she's a strong woman. I never saw her crying when I was a child. But in that moment she broke down crying and she started saying, Mija, all those hours working in the fields, all those sacrifices. And I was wearing my cap and gown, and when she said fields, this image of me standing in the fields with them came to my mind. And that's when I said, oh, I want to do something special for my parents. I want to take my graduation picture. in one of the fields where they work long hours to give us an education.
Yes.
And that's how the idea came the first time.
So just you visualize it, and then you
Yes.
made it become true, and then everybody
Yes.
kind of, I don't know, everybody kind of said, "Wow, this juxtaposition of education and
Yeah.
people working very hard in the
Mhm.
fields just kind of came together and made sense."
Oh, yes, yes. Never did it cross my mind that it will go viral or that a lot of people were going to feel identified with the picture. Somehow, when you're struggling, you think that you're the only one, but then you realize that there's a lot of people with the same story or similar story. Yes.
Similar, yeah, it doesn't have to be
Yes.
exact,
Mhm.
but a lot of people can use it as an example in their
Uh-huh.
lives. And
Yes.
what you did just by visualizing that picture and putting it up on Facebook and making it go viral, I think it's inspired a lot of people, a lot of young
Yes.
people.
And when my pictures went viral, it's very interesting because 3 years before the picture went viral, I was hoping to one day have the opportunity to share my story. And that is because the first time that I shared my story was in a classroom. And when I saw the impact that a story has in other people, that's when I told myself, oh, I hope one day I can do this. I can share my story and I can my goal was to reach out to professors and ask them for the opportunity to share my story. Um, but in order to do that, at first I had to face my fear of public speaking, and that's when I joined Toastmasters, a communication club. And that was my goal. I started preparing myself 3 years before the pictures went viral. In 2017, when I got my bachelor's in psychology, 2 years before my master's, I was selected to be the commencement speaker for my graduation ceremony. And that is that is when I spoke in front of more than 2,000 people. And that's when I got the first invitation to be a keynote speaker for a small conference in a community college. And the question came like, "What are your speaking fees?" And I was like, "Oh no, I do this out of my heart. It's my passion." But never did it cross my mind that one day I was going to become a professional keynote speaker or that I was going to speak for big corporations.
Wow.
Because for me, my goal was to one day have the opportunity, not knowing that this career existed.
Wow.
But
That's pretty impressive.
the picture is a lot of people think, "Oh, you're so lucky the picture went viral. That's why you became a keynote speaker." But they don't know that I was preparing myself 3 years before. Every single Wednesday, I was attending Toastmasters, taking courses, hiring mentors because I really wanted to do it. And I really wanted to go and speak to students. I think that one of the main messages in my keynotes is that you can succeed despite adversity and that you can use your excuses and you can use your adversities as an excuse to stop or you can use it as a reason to keep moving forward. I always tell students that they have the opportunities that their parents didn't have and that the best gift that they can do is to honor their parents by becoming the best version of themselves.
It's very, very true. I mean, our parents that came here, your
Mhm.
parents that came here, my parents came here,
Yes.
um, they did struggle,
Oh,
and
yes.
life was not easy for them.
Mhm.
And their whole goal in life was just to make it a little bit easier for their family,
Yes.
their children. And I mean, you're a prime example that you've done everything possible to live your best life.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
do you remember a time like when you were like at that point, like
Mhm.
the worst point in your life, and you were like 10 seconds like between success and failure? Like, what did you do? What went through your mind
Mhm.
to kind of get you out of that?
I think that one of the most difficult part of my life was when my son was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. And that is because sometimes life is like a roller coaster, like you're all the way up, but you don't know that you're about to fall. And when my son was 5 years old, he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. And when I asked the specialist what causes cerebral palsy, he gave me many explanations. But as soon as he said damage during pregnancy or injury during pregnancy, I immediately blamed my child's father. And that brought me into a lot of depression. But I was barely in my first semester of uh, Cal State San Marcos. I was in Cal State San Marcos. I was in my first semester, and I completely neglected my entire first semester at Cal State. that I was academically disqualified. And I received a letter stating that I could no longer be a student there. And for me, the way the letter was written, it sounded like that's an ultimate decision. And I remember that for a moment I accepted that decision for maybe like about a year and a half. But one morning when I was getting my son ready for school, he asked me, Mama, do you already have a career? Remember that every day you used to say that one day you were going to have a career, that we were going to buy a house and have a puppy? And in that moment when he said that, it was the first time that I heard him speak in a long, clear sentence. And I was praying for that. I was saying, God, if you really exist, heal my son. And hearing my son speak so clearly, because when he was diagnosed, I was told that he might be mentally disabled, or that he will never walk like other kids. But seeing that he was getting better and that he was okay intellectually, for me, it's like, this is a miracle. I asked for this. And after that moment, I promised myself that I will never give up, that giving up was no longer an option. And I went back to Cal State and asked them, what do I need to do so that I can be a student here again?
So your
Yes.
son kind of remotivated you,
He
right?
reminded me of a
Yeah.
promise,
Yeah.
yes.
Because you probably told him how many times, countless
Like
times,
every day.
that you're going to be
Yes.
educated, career, and you're going to have a puppy,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Probably, he's probably thinking about the puppy.
Oh,
That,
yes, yes. He reminded me of that promise. And once I decided to go back, it never crossed my mind to give up. I remember that I will tell myself, it doesn't matter if it takes me 20, 30 years, I'm getting a career. I might not be the smartest one in my classroom, but I will be the most persistent one. And after that, my only goal was to keep that promise that I made to my son.
so what's your next step? Okay, what is the next step for Erica?
Well, now that I'm a keynote speaker and author, I realize that we don't have enough representation. Less than 8% of authors in the US are Hispanic, and less than 1% of speakers are Hispanic. And having that realization, now my new goal or my extra goal is to guide others into becoming authors or professional speakers. There's a lot of demand for speakers.
That's
Yes.
wonderful. And I saw you brought you have your books here and
Hmm.
Harvesting Dreams in English and in Spanish.
English and Spanish,
Um,
yes.
and then you explaining in terms of like what this book here, Haz
Uh-huh.
tus sueños realidad. How did this one come about?
That came about because every time that I give a presentation, so I get asked the same question. Uh, how do I change my life? Or what advice can you give me? And it's like me repeating myself every time, which is great, but there's so much I want to tell them. But if someone is lining up for you to sign their book, you cannot share everything. And that's when the idea of writing this book, Haz tu sueño realidad, with 10 advices, came onto my mind first, and I decided to write it. This is a book that I usually gift. I don't promote it like the other ones, but it's a book that I give to those people that ask me, what advice will you give me? How can I start changing my life? And the very first advice that is in that book is take 100% responsibility for your life.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
and being with
Thank
us and
you.
sharing your story with so many people out there that need to hear it and that want to hear it.
Thank you so much, Eric, for this
Thank you.
opportunity. It was truly an honor.
Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Gracias.